Cool. So, my name's Sophia, and today we're talking a little bit about threat intelligence. So this talk has done the rounds. If you have seen it before, I will not be offended if you walk out halfway. Not much has changed. But today we'll be talking about threat intelligence and how you can implement it into different departments in your organisation and how it's actually beneficial for everyone, not just technical people or non-technical people, and how it can help improve sort of the posture of a business as well. So, who am I? My name's Sophia. I'm a strategic threat intelligence team lead in industries. I'm a CREST certified threat intelligence manager as well. I previously was a pen tester, so I spent about 2 years doing lots of APIs and maybe some external inf. And then I got bored of that. Then I moved into car hacking, did that for about a year and a half, got bored of that. And then I moved into threat intelligence, where I'm not bored yet. So hopefully I'll stay around for time to come. So I'm also an admin of the Ladies of Cheltenham Hacking Society. So if you are local, we do have our next meeting soon on the 19th of September, if you fancy going up country a bit into Cheltenham. I am a Security Queens co-founder as well. So Security Queens is a platform and blog that I founded during COVID with 2 other women in industry, where we wanted to promote free accessible learning material for anyone wanting to upskill in cybersecurity. I was also team captain for Team UK at the European Cybersecurity Challenge, on Team UK 3 times, which is just a big CTF really. It's good fun. Won a bunch of stuff in industry, and according to Channel 4, TV certified cybersecurity expert. I even got the fancy title with that as well. So a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. So this is quite a high level talk if you don't know much about threat intelligence, or perhaps you want to learn more about it. So we'll do a brief introduction to cyber threat intelligence, a snapshot of the cyber threat landscape and why we need CTI to combat that, the benefits of a good CTI program in your organisation, and how organisations can use CTI to fight those cyber battles. So thinking about how we can advance it with technology, combating common problems we find in the CTI field, and also embracing CTI for the future using scary things like AI and machine learning. And hopefully, if all goes to plan, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So what is threat intelligence? So when I first started threat intelligence, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just a bit bored and wanted something new to do. So I just Googled it, as you do. And lots and lots of diagrams and words and numbers. And it was quite confusing, really, because I was like, oh, this might be a bad idea. It looks all very confusing. All lots of like new buzzwords, new acronyms, and it's all very scary. But so we're going to try to dispel that and actually simplify it a little bit more to make threat intelligence more appealing. So what really is threat intelligence? So to help explain threat intelligence, I found this really good definition. And it's basically the process of collecting, analysing and sharing information about cyber threats. So you want to collect that data, you want to process it, you want to extract actionable intelligence from that to try and understand a threat actor's motive, target, and their attack behaviours. So what threat intelligence does is help us become more proactive to cyber threats rather than reactive. So instead of, oh God, we're hacked, what do we do now, is what can we do to prevent ourselves getting hacked, in an ideal world anyways. And to help explain it, I've got this lovely triangle, which explains the different tiers of cyber threat intelligence as well. So the first one we're going to talk about is the strategic level. So this is the team that I sit in currently at my company, and what we want to focus on is the high level intelligence. So who are the bad people and why are they doing it? So you want to do an overview of the organisation's threat landscape, why we might be a target. Usually it's financial motivation. So they want money, or they want to steal data to sell on for money, or they want to steal access to sell on for money. So we want to understand why we might be a target and who might be targeting us. So this helps all the big cheeses at the top of the business decide things like budget, policy, resource allocation. And it's primarily non-technical. So you're taking all that lovely technical knowledge and technical intelligence and trying to translate that into a business need and a business understanding. Usually shared in the form of reports or briefings. So, you know, big CEOs don't have time to read 200-page reports, so we have to condense that quite a lot into maybe a 1 or 2 page report. and it focuses on the long-term strategy of a business. So we want to think about how we can make our business and organisation more robust for the future. So operational is the next level of intelligence down, and it focuses on something called TTPs. So TTPs is tactics, techniques, and procedures, and this is how a threat actor is attacking our organisation. So you want to identify what kind of capability they have, what opportunities they have, what intent they have, what tools they might be using, and the method, timing, and nature of an attack. So we want to identify things like IOCs, indicators of compromise, to help respond to those threats. And usually an operational team will use those types of intelligence to work with things like incident response or other defense teams in an organization. So this helps us attribute certain types of attacks to certain adversary and threat actor groups. And intelligence might include detailed TTP information that can be used in other departments in an organization. So if we think of incident response, the security operations center, we've got IT managers that kind of understand that technical information, and sometimes threat hunters that can take that information and go for looking for those threats as well. And finally, we'll talk about tactical threat intelligence. And this is quite a simple kind of layer, and is what is it? So we want to know things like what the attack actually is, so things like network logs, and it's machine readable usually, so it can be filled into things like TI feeds and automated to fill those out. So intelligence may be shared in the form of APIs just for ease. It uses things called sticks and taxi, which is standards for threat intelligence information, which I won't go into. I don't want to bore you, it's still quite early and I think lots of you got sore heads, so we won't go into that. But what it is basically it's just raw data that hasn't been analysed. IP addresses, file hashes, we think this is bad, what can we do from that? But what that information can give us is real-time alerts. So if we do find a dodgy IP address, we can then issue an alert or firewall rule against that. And it focuses on the immediate future. What can we do now to prevent it? What can we do at this very second? So again, using things like IRSOC, any SIEM software that you might have, or any IDS, OPS software that you might have as well. And we'll talk a little bit about the threat intelligence lifecycle as well. So anytime you want to implement sort of a threat intelligence activity or a program into your organization, we follow something called the threat intelligence lifecycle, which, depending on what source you go to, is either a 5 or a 6-stage process. But for today, I guess we'll be following the 5-stage. And what we'll go through is each phase, why it's important, and how it feeds through into the next phase of that cycle. So the first one, planning objectives and direction. Fairly self-explanatory. You want to plan your threat intelligence activity. So you want to define your strategy, your requirements, why you're doing it, who needs to be involved, what deliverables you want from it, and what your objectives are, what you want to achieve in that entire sort of activity. You've got data collection, so there's no intelligence without data, one of my favourite sayings in CTI. And what we can do is collect it from loads of different sources. So we have internal sources such as network logs or maybe packets. And we've also got external sources, so things like news, media, open source intelligence. And we want to combine that and just collect as much data as we can, but not too much data. And I'll go into why in a little bit. After we get all this amazing data, we then want to process it so we're not just looking at numbers and words. So this might be formatting it into a spreadsheet, this might be removing false positives, this might be removing things that we don't think are necessary for this threat intelligence exercise, but we just wanted to make it a little bit easier for us to understand for the next phase of the threat intelligence lifecycle. Analysis and production. So this is when we have our nice data set that's all clean and it's in a spreadsheet, maybe we've got a pie chart, and we want to analyse it and extract actionable intelligence that can benefit us for our threat intelligence activity and then produce it somehow. So we might have decided in the first stage that we want a report or we want a slideshow or we want just a nice spreadsheet and we want to create that deliverable using all the lovely data that we have, but also analysing it to create it as too. And then we need to share the data. There's no point going through all of this work if you don't share it with anyone. So making sure you're including all the stakeholders that would benefit from it. Cut phones are not necessary, but if you would like to use them, I'm not going to blame you. But we need to make sure we share it, shout about it, because there's no point going through all of this hard work and then just putting it in a drawer somewhere. And finally, feedback. Lessons learned, looking back at the threat intelligence activity. What went well? What didn't go well? Did we miss anything? And what we can do to improve our next threat intelligence activity. So threat intelligence has gone through a bit of an evolution. So I've picked out a few milestones in the past sort of few years that have marked the importance of threat intelligence and why it's important to us in the present day. So in 1988, the first CERT team is established. People kind of, they understand there's a need to respond, a need to kind of understand the breaches, what's going on. And then in the 1990s to 2000s, we see a rise in cybercrime. So people start to see phrases like phishing, ransomware, DDoS attacks, and organizations begin to recognize the need for intelligence to actually try to protect themselves against that. In 2010, there's a few high-profile breaches, and people start to understand the need for TTPs exactly, to then strengthen their defences and be more specific about their strategy against these TAs, threat actors or adversaries. So just a few there was 2014, they had the Sony Pictures breach, 2016, the supposed interference with the election, and of course the WannaCry ransomware epidemic, which really put a spotlight on ransomware. And in an ideal world, going forward in the 2020s, CTI is considered quite essential for most organisations, and it includes sort of gathering that information, analysing it, and sharing it about those threats. So, yeah. Now, why do we need CTI? So here's a very, very quick snapshot into the UK cyber threat landscape. This is the UK. So we've got three things, and this is very simplified. Obviously, there's a lot of complex things going on in the cyber threat landscape, but I've just picked out three sort of big ones to talk to you about today. So first of all, cybercrime. So ransomware is obviously a big thing. We always see it in the news, and unfortunately a lot of organisations, a lot across loads of different industries are getting popped. So there's a nice sort of graph at the bottom there and at the top showing the targeted sectors of ransomware actors, and you've also got ransomware cases as well, so a bit of fluctuation but still quite high. So there was obviously the British Library hack, so that was actually the listing 20 bitcoins for all that data on the dark web. You've got JD Sports that were unfortunately popped as well, and even the police. So still a bad thing, but we're trying to make progress there. Online fraud, so we've got the Tinder Swindler, really, really great documentary if you haven't seen that on Netflix. People unfortunately falling for things like Facebook Marketplace scams or like text messages saying you need to pay for your parcel, that kind of thing. And a big one with AI as well is deepfakes, so cloning either voices or using AI to clone a face or something to try and mimic and imitate a person. And we've also got access brokers. So behind most ransomware activities, they also try to sell that access that they've gained to that company. So the aim is to break in and basically sell it to the highest bidder. So there's loads of sectors that are impacted, but there's quite a big focus on industrials. So we think about construction, energy, manufacturing. So you can see there's a few listings of, I've got local admin, price 2,500, and these are all sort of forum pastes that have been taken from the dark web. We've also got hacktivism. So a lot of hacktivism is sort of low-level denial of service, trying to operationally disrupt different companies, different governments. But groups such as Killnet have been focused on Ukraine allies. So unfortunately, with the geopolitical tensions between Ukraine and Russia, this has kind of allowed lots of pro-Russian hacktivism groups to kind of stand up against that. So you can see in that screenshot there, that's actually them asking people to kind of target the UK healthcare sector. So quite scary. We've also got pro-Palestinian groups targeting education and financial organisations in the West. Continuing use of ransomware, but we've also got the use of access brokers as well. And finally, nation states. So nation states is a very complex topic, so I won't go too much into it. But what we're particularly worried is a lot about supply chain. So indicators and early warnings of supply chain attacks to generate potential global disruption. So we had obviously solar winds that happened, the absolute chaos that caused. This usually involves covert pre-positioning, so it's not just, there's a SSH port open on the internet, I'm just going to go hack it. It's a lot of a strategy. There's lots of resources and financial sort of investment into that. So when we think about nation states, we're thinking maybe about Russia, Iran, North Korea. They have historically deployed things like destructive malware. There was the MOD breach as well. So improving human operations, trying to profile target nations too. But it's not all doom and gloom. So we'll talk a bit about the benefits of threat intelligence and how we can combat those types of threats. So a non-exhaustive list, the number one being it empowers organizations and makes them feel more confident in their ability to proactively protect themselves, but also react to situations as they happen. So not only anticipate and react to their threats, but improving their strategy for mitigation and defense. It enriches knowledge about the threat actors themselves, the scenarios and the type of attack vectors they might use. So by attributing different attack behaviors to certain threat actors, they then can shape their strategy around that, but also promoting collaborative knowledge around sharing that information with either sector-specific sharing centers or within their organization. So supporting incident response programs and strategies, I've mentioned this a few times, but helping feed into those blue team activities. Promoting continuous learning because the cybersecurity world is constantly changing and so are the threats, so we need to keep on our toes, constantly learning what's happening out there, tracking new vulnerabilities and bugs, tracking what new tools they're using. And it enables us to analyse those threats as well to understand the sort of bigger picture. And finally, the long-term goal of saving costs. This is like very, very simplified. Fewer breaches, less money spent. That is the goal. So, how do we integrate threat intelligence to fight those cyber battles? We'll talk about the SOC and incident response because I've mentioned this quite a few times in my presentation so far, but it is one of the sort of end deliverable teams that usually make use of this information the most. So in my current role, I talk a lot to the incident response teams and how we can use our information to help with their activities. So there's a lovely diagram there of how TI feeds might feed into the different things that the SOC do. But threat intelligence can basically help them make those decisions in the incident response process. So triaging those alerts, maybe we can help with that. Identifying false positives, maybe our intelligence can help bottom that out, that kind of thing. So as we find things, we can issue alerts to the SOC or the incident response team for new behaviours. So, cool, they're using this tool now, or this is a domain they're using, send that along, and then they can do what they need to do. So types of IOCs might include file hashes, so file-based indicators, network-based indicators, so things like IP addresses or domain names, behavioural indicators, dodgy stuff happening on your computer really, or artifact-based indicators, so things like registry keys or configuration files. But threat intelligence platforms, also known as TIPs, can be used to help kind of with this collaboration and this communication channel. So by sort of sharing a tip with the SOC or the incident response team, we can help curate this information and have a curated feed to make it real-time and accessible for everyone with the latest threats. Essentially, IOCs can help security teams detect and prevent these cyber threats and attacks more efficiently, and again, hopefully, minimizing damage to the organization. I sound very positive, but I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes. So now we'll talk a little bit about tips. So what a threat intelligence platform and feed does, it basically combines intelligence from loads of different sources and loads of different feeds. So by using a tip, we can help automatically generate alerts for an organization. So it takes that load off the human aspect of threat intelligence as well. But most importantly, it allows a real-time continuous flow of information that's continuously updated by all the up-to-date stuff happening in the world. So it's a great thing. Tips can be integrated with SIEM solutions. Benefits include sharing the data. collecting and analysing the data, enabling that collaboration and information sharing during the instance. But the thing that I really like about this little definition here, it makes sure that defences are updated and ready. So we want to focus on that up-to-date portion of that data, making sure that flow of information is constantly coming through and people are continuously being informed. Now, this is something I work with quite a lot, and it's a really great thing to know if you're a pen tester or a red teamer or working towards offensive security, and that's integrating threat intelligence into threat intelligence-led pen testing. So intelligence-led pen testing helps basically use threat intelligence to emulate adversary behaviour. So 2 tasks are achieved. One, we can do a threat profile of that actor or adversary that might be attacking an organisation. So the tester, whilst they're doing their hacking, can help profile that and then target the critical assets that an adversary might. And then we sort of fine-tune that attack strategy to mimic a real-world adversary. So applying the TTPs to attack the organisation if we want to mimic Lockbit or if we want to mimic a certain nation state, for example. So what regular pen testing does, it does not consider TI, it kind of focuses on a methodology. And if you think about like OWASP Top 10, or you might have your own sort of cheat sheet to work through, and it might rely on standard frameworks, processes, and tester efficacy. But intelligence-led pen testing relies on the TI output to shape the way you attack a business. So that's the main difference there, where every phase of the CTI activity is fed into the pen testing assessment. So benefits of this includes it kind of mimics the real world. It helps an organisation have good adversary perception. It's really effective in combating adversaries, and it allows them to have a more holistic sort of stance when they think about their defences and their strategy. So information sharing as well. You've got to share the information. That's one thing I want you to know, taking away from this presentation. So information sharing communities and networks give organisations access to real-time and relevant information. So that could affect them. So there's a little graph at the bottom that shows all the different industry-specific sharing centres, and it brings together industry, academia and government into the same room so they can talk about all the things they're finding and all the things they want to share. So there's loads of different ISACs, we call them. So there's aviation, automotive, financial, communications, defence. But essentially it's just bringing the like-minded folk into the room and being able to share that information. Threat hunting, which I've mentioned a few times. I don't know much about threat hunting, which is why this is a very blank page. But essentially, it's allowing the threat hunters to use information they're finding in the threat intelligence activity to help them identify threats within their network. So if you kind of look at this little cycle here, we can provide them with that data in the sort of collect data phase, and then they can go on to trying to identify those threats. I'm going to mention it again, but it's also providing them with up-to-date data that's actually relevant to the team and the organisation as well. So how can we use all these wonderful things and advance them with technology? Of course, I have to talk about AI and machine learning, because if I didn't, it wouldn't be a cyber conference. So we will talk about it. And the great thing about machine learning and AI is that we can use it to improve analytics within CTI. So by using AI, we can do fast response to threats, and we can sort of shape the model to be either supervised or unsupervised to create that output that we want. It could also help reduce bias, which can be often associated with human analytics. One thing that we're very, very aware of in sort of CTI is that we have our own biases and we have our own sort of thoughts and opinions, which can actually influence the way we analyse data and the way we present deliverables. If you take that sort of human aspect out of it, we could hopefully reduce that. We can also do predictive analytics as well, which is quite fancy. But a problem we have is we have a lot of risk of human error and false positives because of the amount of data we collect. I can only look at so many spreadsheets before I lose my marbles. But AI kind of takes that away and takes that sort of weight off my shoulders. They can use that to also identify patterns in really large data sets. Automate processes such as detection and alerts. but also improve information sharing as well. So trying to identify the type of information to share, kind of removing some of the ethical and legal implications around sharing that data with people, and establishing the trust between two parties. But I found this really good diagram that kind of shows how AI can help that life cycle we were talking about. So you can see there collecting, it could help collect the right type of data to try and reduce the false positives and the processing of the data we have to do in the next phase. Parsing and normalizing and structuring that data as well. Helping and analyze it without bias. Personalized deliverables to different stakeholders from threat intelligence activity. And also using customer feedback to shape what we can improve in the next one. But as always, we also have challenges with CTI. It wouldn't be all sunshine and rainbows if it was cyber, so we have to think about what could potentially go wrong and how we can sort of help that. Something I still struggle with is just things are always changing, but that's quite good because I get bored quite easily. I mean, I've worked in 3 specialties and I'm like 5 years into my career. So it works for me because I'm constantly having to learn things and adapt. And the good thing about cybersecurity is bad things are always happening. So you have to constantly think about all the new things happening, how we can prevent it, how we can learn to kind of protect ourselves with these evolving threats. So if you see sort of like 1980s, we had like the first ransomware, and now we look into the 2010s, we kind of think about more complex social engineering attacks, which might lead to ransomware, and the multifaceted sort of adversary attack paths that might happen in an organization. Too much data. When I end up with hundreds of thousands of lines of spreadsheets and just numbers, it's just way too much. I did not need that much data. And then I end up looking like this because I'm just too flustered. So data is good. We need data, but we need to try not sort of be over encumbered with data because then we can sort of lose the plot and cry for a little bit. But we get back, it's fine. Stakeholder buy-in. I have a lot of people say to me like, oh, we don't need CTR. We've already got security program. I think a lot of people, when they say CTI, they think, oh, we need to set up a new team, we need to hire more people, we need to do a new thing, when actually it's something that you can already adopt in an organization. There's loads of things that you can sort of bring in and sort of implement into your existing teams. So kind of trying to phrase that in business terminology of the numbers, the financial aspect, there's the resource allocation and how it might play out for them. So we need to embrace CTI for the future. What can organisations do? So some of you might be in a position to make these decisions, or at least have a voice into recommending these decisions to your company. So integration with security operations would be my number one sort of recommendation. So trying to work with the blue team people in the organisation. So this will help enhance that threat detection, but also that response and mitigation capability too. Monitoring and analysis, so even talking to your IT team that kind of watches the estate to see what's happening, establishing mechanisms to enable that continuous monitoring, but also analysing for any emerging threats that might be happening in your IT estate, or attack patterns like dodgy behaviours that you can then attribute to certain adversaries. Information sharing, so fostering that culture or sharing information in an organisation. So not just keeping it to yourselves or keeping it to your own team. If your team finds something really cool or something really bad, then sharing that information with others so they can use that going forward. Automation, so data can be tedious. If you want to implement automated processes, that might be a way. So implementing automation to at least improve the processing of the data or even disseminating it. So I've worked with organisations that, for example, have automated threat alerts. If a CVE comes out that's, 8 or higher, they'll automatically issue an alert for that. So that's just a very simple example. Customizing threat intelligence. A 200-page report won't work for a CEO, but then a 1-page business jargon report won't work for your SOC team. So you have to make sure that you're tailoring that deliverable and that end output to the stakeholder so they can get the most information and most use out of it. Working with incident response, so learning, sort of providing input into their playbooks and regularly updating incident response plans to reflect the latest threat intelligence. regularly threat hunting, so proactively looking for those threats using up-to-date threat intelligence within the organisation's network. Staying informed about certain regulations and standards. So I know the financial sort of industry have certain regulations around threat intelligence-led pen testing. I think ISO 27001 now has something about threat intelligence, so just keeping informed about that, making sure that you're in line with those up-to-date regulations and standards. And investing in AI and machine learning to make your lives easier. If you want, I'm not going to force you to. So keeping up to date with how it could benefit your organisation and your existing processes, or how you can create those new processes. And that is me. I've rattled through that quite quickly. It was quite high level, but I'd be open to any questions. I think we've got about 10 minutes. Am I on time? We're on time. 8 minutes. But thank you so much. Yeah, feel free to reach out. Oh, we've got a question at the back.
At the back?
At the back.
Shouting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm a teacher, which helps the shouting bit. I'm very interested in this area, but I'm not an expert. I'd be very interested in hearing from you about your thoughts about how this fits within not just the sort of FTSE 100 companies, where I can see that you have all these teams set up. It's easy to perceive that happening. But within SMEs and maybe in the education sector, how do companies that are very tiny or organisations that don't have this kind of infrastructure get started?
So that's the $1 million question, really, isn't it? Because we can always throw loads of money into a solution, but it still might not work for a business. And when we think about smaller businesses or perhaps entities that don't have access to those financial resources, CTI is actually a really great space to work in because of the amount of free and accessible resources and the amount of implementation of existing processes you can use. So, for example, set one day a week aside just to look about new threats, set up an automated feed, loads of feeds are free of charge, and you can tailor it to your business. Even using something like that's better than nothing. And then as you learn more and mature as an organisation, then you can think about, okay, that person can just do the fun stuff. But then it's also about sharing that information. I think lots of people get scared by the term cyber threat intelligence because they think, oh, I don't have the money for that, I don't have the people for that or specialty. But actually it's a joint effort of just, keeping in tune with what's happening in the world, utilising those free resources and making everyone kind of contribute into that process as well. Yeah, no worries. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I was like, where's that voice coming from?
It's coming from the back.
Everywhere.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much. It was a great talk.
Thank you.
I have a question. So sometimes when you decide to publish, it's really a big moral decision, isn't it? So how do you manage it? How do you decide when to publish a 0-day without shutting down Western cyber counter-terrorism?
Yeah.
How do you decide?
It is quite a fine line, isn't it? Because you want to be able to help, but then actually providing that data, especially in a public space, could be weaponized by someone bad. So kind of leaning on what Ken said earlier about responsible disclosure, my first sort of go-to would be always try to talk to them directly in sort of a side conversation rather than posting it on the internet for everyone to hear. But I think it's quite difficult to gauge whether it's worth sharing or not. It's better safe than sorry, right? It's better to share something and go, there you go, oh, that's not too bad, rather than I'm not going to share that and then a month later they get popped and everything goes bad. So I think as humans, it's good to sort of trust our gut instincts. But for me, I think it's always worth having that conversation anyways, or sharing that information anyways through these ISACs or whichever. And if they decide, that's not useful to us, that's fine. But I think a lot of businesses have different risk appetites as well. So one thing might be detrimental to a business will be nothing to another. So it's just good to have that conversation, and to share it anyways. And what they do with that is up to them. Yeah. One, I think, yeah. 2.
Who's first?
Are there any certifications or any places that you recommend looking into to learn more about CTI?
If you've got deep pockets, SANs do some great courses. But other than that, there's also CRTIA, so Crest Registered Threat Intelligence Analyst. That's a really great entry-level one to get under your belt if you did want to move into the CTI field. There's some great sort of like things like Udemy courses, loads of literature you can get into. CTI is kind of unique in its way that you can't really measure your capability because things are always changing in the CTI, but it's great to have that analytical mindset, which is what a lot of these certifications do.
Just one last quick one.
Yep.
Hi. Thanks for the talk. It was really insightful. The only question I was going to ask is you're saying we're getting to the stage where we're using more machine learning and AI.
Yeah.
But isn't one of the to reduce biasness?
Yeah.
But don't you have the downside of if fake information is put
Yes.
through?
Yeah.
Couldn't that class as a bit of a bias?
100%. Yeah, so that is risk, obviously, that you, when using AI models, lots of people lie on the internet, lots of people lie in their data sets. So I think if you were to use AI or machine learning in your organization, it would still be good to do a little sort of QA of like, where are the sources? Can we trust them? Not it's just some person on the internet, but are they from a reputable government department or whatever? And it's sort of making sure that we can trust where that data is coming from before feeding it into our program. I think that would be the number one for that. But before we finish, my rookie is sat right there. Come see her talk, 2:30 on track 2. Other than that, thank you very much.
Are you going to be around today?
I am going to be around.